Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. I hope all of you are doing well. And please let me know if my voice is sound and clear. I'm constantly changing the settings of my, what they call this, the mixer. Yeah, so I'm trying for my voice and volume to be more podcasty, whatever that means, because the voice is the most important element of any sort of YouTube channel and the podcast. So I'm trying to see if these settings is good enough for you. Today, I'm excited about this live streaming because it will be comprehensive. At the beginning, there will be a little bit of historical context. Thank you guys that you say that the sound is perfect. At the beginning, I will put the conflict in a historical context because most of the analysts and commentators and talking heads on TVs do not do that. So we have to understand what is the position of the collective Arabic countries when it comes to Israel. Do they want to throw the Israelis to the Mediterranean, as the Israelis claim? Or there were different types of policies depending on the time, on the era, and the different governance in different Arabic countries? And what is the current position of the Arab League and the Arabic countries nowadays headed by Saudi Arabia? What is the position of Israel? Recently, they are making new statements rejecting the two-state solution. What is the role of the United States, the complicity of the United States? Why are they escalating in the Middle East instead of de-escalating in the Middle East? And how the West lost its image as the protector of human rights and democracy around the world? And how can't they weaponize it in the future, because all masks have fallen when it came to the issue of Palestine? And lastly, if you remember in the last live streaming, I addressed briefly that the Russian aerospace or the Air Force is conducting now regular flights near the demarcation point between Israel and Syria on the borders with the Golan Heights. And I told you, I don't know yet the reason. What are they aiming for? And we have probably an answer from an Israeli newspaper, Yedot Ahranot, which they say that they have an answer for that. So stay tuned so that till the end of this live streaming so that we can understand and read what the Israeli side is thinking of. Now, Arabs want to push the Israelis to the ocean or to the Mediterranean, right? This is what the official Israeli propagandists and officials say and claim in this regard. We have to divide the conflict into different time eras. At the beginning, when the Israel was created and the UN decided to divide Palestine into two parts, or basically they divided it into three parts. This was the plan for the partition of Palestine, right? As you can see, all the green parts, they were considered Israel. The orange part was considered Palestine. And in the middle, Jerusalem was considered an internationally controlled, or it was controlled by the international community. The rest of the areas were divided between Palestine and Israel. You can see that the Palestinians had a border with Lebanon, the Israelis had a border with Syria, and they couldn't occupy the Golan Heights, of course, according to this partition plan. And the Gaza Strip was quite big and long. And when this partition plan happened by the UN, several Arabic countries decided to attack Israel because they didn't recognize the legitimacy of Israel to have a state over what the Arabs and many other people in the region believe it's historic Palestine, which was under, of course, Ottoman Empire occupation, and then the Brits came and colonized it. And when they colonized it, they started organizing what is called the migration of the Jewish people from Europe to Palestine. And there was a persecution against the Jewish people, so they wanted to come to Palestine. Now, this is the map of control over Palestine in 1948, right? And when the Arabic countries and Arabic armies attacked Israel, they lost the war against Israel. So if you can see this map of control and how it turned to later in 1949. In 1949, we have, this is the map of control over the Palestinian territories. So all these red areas were considered also Palestinian. And when the Arabic countries attacked Israel, they lost the war and they lost all these red or pinkish areas. They only were able to keep the green area, the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank here, and Jerusalem was in the hands of the international community. So the Arabic countries and the Palestinians again lost large. I will just again do this so that you guys can see, or maybe I can go back a little bit so it will be more clear for you. So anyways, this is it. I will try to see. Yeah, this is so much better now. Okay, so the Arabs lost a large swath of territories, and these pink areas were all lost, and they kept the green areas. This is in 1949. In 1967, the Israelis this time, they attacked the Arabic countries. So we have the 48 that the Arabic countries attacked against the Israeli side. And the Israeli side claimed that they have to wage a preemptive war against the Arabic countries because they claimed that there was an imminent threat against the national security of Israel. So they attacked Syria, Palestine, and the Palestinian territories and Egypt, and they conquered, as you can see, all the green areas, everything which was already theirs, and then this West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and the Sinai. It turned into this one. It turned all into green, you can see, right? So Israel has become all of a sudden occupying the Golan Heights, occupying the West Bank, occupying Gaza, and occupying the Sinai, all in 6 days. This was the 1949 ceasefire line, as you can see, guys. And this is the 1967 line. It was a large enlargement, I would say, for the Israeli territories here. So this was in 1967, right? So what happened later is that in 1973, Hafez al-Assad and Anwar al-Sadat. Hafez al-Assad was the president of Syria and Anwar al-Sadat was the president of Egypt. And they secretly planned to attack the territories that Israel occupied in the 1967 war. And in this attack in 1973, there were no intentions of destroying Israel or destroying what is dedicated for Israel under the UN plan for partition of Palestine, but rather Syria aimed at liberating the Golan Heights, and the Egyptians were aiming to liberate the Sinai. So if we go back to the map, the Egyptians wanted to liberate the Sinai, this area, and the Syrians wanted to liberate this area. They didn't attack any other places. They just wanted to liberate the territories occupied by the Israeli side. How did this war ended? The Egyptians managed to cross the defensive lines of the Israelis, and they were advancing in the Sinai, not completely, of course, and they stopped at a certain point. And the Israelis were, at the beginning, were highly focused on the Egyptian side because they had a bigger army. And the Syrians were advancing in the Golan Heights, and they almost liberated most of the Golan Heights, which belongs to the Syrians. However, when the Egyptian army stopped advancing in the Sinai, and Anwar al-Sadat said that, I'm done. This is the limit of my attack, and now I want to negotiate for a settlement with the Israelis. And Hafez al-Assad felt betrayed, and the Israelis started advancing again. They redirected all their forces again against Syria in the Golan Heights, in this small front against Syria here, as you can see, and they attacked the Syrian forces, and they recaptured most of the Golan Heights. However, the Syrians managed through negotiations to liberate the what is called Al-Qunaytira area, a very small area. Here, the rest of the Golan Heights remained in the hands of the Israelis. Up until this moment, the Israelis occupied the Syrian Golan Heights. Donald Trump recognized the Golan Heights as Israeli territory, although all UN Security Council and UN General Assembly resolutions say this is a Syrian territory, but the Americans, because they believe in a rules-based order, so they can gift any other people's piece of land to Israel. Then we had the 1982 war, when Israel attacked against Lebanon, citing again national security threats coming from the Palestinian factions in southern Lebanon, and they occupied southern Lebanon. They reached to Beirut, and this has formed resistance against them. Hezbollah came, Amal movement came, and the Syrian nationalist movements, and also the socialists, the communists. There were so many groups who fought against the Lebanese occupation, the Israeli occupation forces, and they managed to kick out all the Israeli occupation forces, in exception for a small part called Sheba Farms in the year 2000. But before that, all these years that you can see, guys, between 48 and it was the only time that the Arabs tried to truly break the bonds of the Israelis was in the 48 war. After that, they were just trying to liberate their territories that the international law dedicated for them. And then we had the Oslo Accords, right? The Oslo Accords were very important peace negotiations that started in 1993, between 1993 and 1995. Lots of times we hear about it in the media, right? And we hear about the Oslo Accords, but we don't know what the Oslo Accords are. So the Oslo Accords, the first Oslo Accord, known as Oslo I, was signed on September 1993. The agreement between the Israeli and Palestinian leadership saw each side recognize the other for the first time. Both sides also pledged to end their decades-long conflict. A second accord, known as Oslo II, was signed in September 1995 and went into more detail on the structure of bodies that the peace process was supposed to form. The Oslo Accords were supposed to bring about Palestinian self-determination in the form of a Palestinian state alongside Israel. This would mean that Israel, which was formed on the land of historic Palestine in 1948 in an event Palestinians known as the Nakba, would accept Palestinian claims to national sovereignty. The claims, however, would only be limited to a fraction of historic Palestine, with the rest left to Israel's sovereignty. So the Palestinians even agreed to recognize the legitimacy of the Israeli state and accept that they would have a statehood on a fraction of land compared to what the situation was in 1948. And before the Oslo Accords, guys, because it started in 1993, right? The Egyptians signed a peace treaty with the Israelis in 1978, the Camp David Accords. And then the Jordanians in 1994, Wadi Araba, they signed, right? Now we have the Bahrainis, we have the Emiratis. So there are many Arabic countries who already, or not many, probably 4 or 5, already have peace agreements with Israel. Palestinians say we are ready, but we need our nationhood. And now we have the Saudis coming and leading the Arabic consensus, let's say, and saying, okay, we will normalize relationship with Israel, but with one condition: you have to give a statehood to the Palestinians. No statehood, no peace agreement. And Saudi Arabia is too important, in my opinion, for the Israelis to ignore. And despite that, they are challenging not only the Saudis, but also the Israelis. But on what ground the Saudis are standing in order to promote their plan for any sort of peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis? And please bear in mind, guys, I'm here not promoting for any sort of agreement or disagreement. I'm explaining what happened in the past and what is happening now, right? So I'm not taking a position in this, just for you guys to know before we continue this. The Saudis are basing there or standing on a solid ground, and it is called the Arab Peace Initiative. But what is the Arab Peace Initiative? Everybody talks about on TV and they say, oh, there is an Arab Initiative for Peace. But what is it about? This is the Arab Initiative piece. It's very, very simple, guys. It doesn't take so much time to understand it. And this was all signed in 2002 in Beirut Arab League summit between 27 Arab League between the 22 Arabic countries. They all put their signatures on it. So there is a consensus in the Arab world that they will accept the legitimacy of Israel. They will accept it as a state, but with preconditions. What are these conditions that the Arab side or the Arabic side, that all Arab leaders put their signatures on? A, complete withdrawal from the occupied Arab territories, including the Syrian Golan Heights, to the 4th of June 1967 line, and the territories still occupied in southern Lebanon. B, attain a just solution to the problem of Palestinian refugees to be agreed upon in accordance with the UN General Assembly resolution. So the first clause is about territorial sovereignty, that Israel has to withdraw to the line of 4th of June 1967 when Israel attacked its neighboring countries and occupied largest swaths of their territories. And the second, it's about the refugees, that we have millions of refugees, that they have to go back to their countries. And the Palestinians agreed on even just a few hundred thousands of them, because there are millions of them, right, outside of Palestine at the moment, refugees. And they said, okay, we know that it is illogical to ask the millions of them to have the right to come back to their homes, but we would at least probably need few hundred thousands of them to come back so that we tell our people that there was a solution, right? And there is a UN General Assembly resolution regarding this. What is the third condition? C, accept establishment of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state on the Palestinian territories occupied since 4th of June 1967 in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, with East Jerusalem as its capital. In return, the Arab states will do the following. A, consider the Arab-Israeli conflict over, sign a peace agreement with Israel and achieve peace for all states in the region, establish normal relations with Israel within the framework of this comprehensive peace plan. So, in short, the Arab Peace Initiative asking Israel to withdraw its forces from the territories they occupied after 1967 war on the 4th of June. Second, they're asking the establishment of the Palestinian states on the territories that Israelis occupied in 1967, which is considered part of a future Palestinian state according to the international law. And third, they're asking Israel to accept the return of some Palestinian refugees to their homeland. This is the three conditions. And in return, the Arabic countries will consider the Arab-Israeli conflict is over. They no more have a conflict with it, and they will seek to normalize the relationship and have normal relations and diplomatic relations with them. However, in 2002, Ariel Sharon, who was the prime minister back then of Israel, he rejected the Arab Initiative for Peace, and he rejected the hand which was extended to the Israelis to sign a peace deal with the all collective Arabic countries. And since then, we can see that nothing new happened. And I think the biggest event that happened after that was in 2006, which was the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, which, in my opinion, revived the sense of, okay, there is something in the Arabic world, and that is Israel is an unbeatable army, the army that cannot be defeated, an invincible army. This is the narrative that has been that many people were convinced of, right? And Israel is superior. They have a strong air force. They have the United States in their back, and you can see what the United States is doing in the region. They are hitting Baghdad. They are occupying Libya. They are doing this and that, right? So we cannot really defeat Israel because they are very strong and they have the United States in their back. But in 2006, because Hezbollah managed to drive the Israeli forces of the Lebanese territories, again, for the second time, there was this revival of the sense among the Arabic people that, maybe we can defeat the Israelis. And the And the concept of the defeat is not something like we're going to completely eradicate Israel and something that we can destroy Israel. No, but the concept that if we are attacked, we can defend ourselves and we can emerge victorious in terms that Israel sets, for example, a set of goals, and we were going to do this and that, we're going to occupy these territories, and then they cannot do that, and they are forced to leave Lebanon. So this has revived some sense among the Arabic people that Israel is not really an invincible army. And there was a term used in 2006 by the General Secretary of Hezbollah, Nasrallah. He said, Israel is like a spider web, he said. Or it said weaker than a spider web. Like it can be, if you put your finger, or you can break it. This was like something he was trying to compare with. So many people were, let's say, convinced that Israel is not really invincible army. And in 2023, after the Hamas attack, this has been revived again. And I think the idea that to see all these Western countries are siding with Israel, and Israel is committing all these crimes, heinous crimes in the Gaza Strip, is also raising questions among the Arabic public. Do we really want to normalize relation with such a country that has so much blood on their hands, and from our brethren in Palestine? These are questions are being asked by the Palestinians and by the Arabic people on a daily basis, and not only by the Arab people, but also from the international public. And as I told you, in 2002, it was Prime Minister Ariel Sharon who refused to accept the Arabic Peace Initiative. And now we have Benjamin Netanyahu, who posted this statement on Twitter or on X, and he told the following. He said, basically, he refuses the two-state solution, right? Let's take a look together what he said here.
אנחנו ממשיכים במלחמה בכל החזיתות ובכל הגזרות. אנחנו לא נותנים חסינות לאף מחבל, לא בעזה, לא בלבנון, לא בסוריה ולא בשום מקום. מי שמנסה לפגוע בנו, אנחנו פוגעים בו. בעניין חטופינו, אנחנו החזרנו עד היום 110 מהחטופים הביתה, אנחנו מחויבים להחזיר את כולם. זהו אחד מיעדי המלחמה, והלחץ הצבאי הוא תנאי הכרחי להשלמתו. אני עובד בעניין הזה סביב השעון, אבל שיהיה ברור, אני דוחה על הסף את תנאי הקנייה של מפלצות החמאס. החמאס דורש תמורת שחרור חטופינו את סיום המלחמה, הוצאת כוחותינו מעזה, שחרור כל הרוצחים והאנסים של הנוח'בה, והשארת חמאס על כנו. אם נסכים לכך, לוחמינו נפלו לשווא. אם נסכים לכך, לא נוכל להבטיח את ביטחון אזרחינו, לא נוכל להחזיר את המפונים בבטחה לבתיהם, וה7 באוקטובר הבא יהיה רק עניין של זמן. אני לא מוכן להשלים עם פגיעה אנושה כזאת בביטחון ישראל, ולכן לא נסכים לכך. התנאים שמעמיד החמאס מחדדים אמת פשוטה. אין תחליף לניצחון. רק ניצחון מוחלט יבטיח את חיסול החמאס והחזרת כל חטופינו. את הדברים האלה אמרתי לנשיא ביידן בשיחתנו בסוף השבוע. אני מאוד מעריך את התמיכה של ארצות הברית בישראל, גם הבאתי זאת בפני הנשיא. ועם זאת, אני עומד בתוקף על האינטרסים החיוניים שלנו. הדגשתי בפני הנשיא ביידן את הנחישות שלנו להשלים את כל יעדי המלחמה, ולהבטיח שעזה לא תהווה עוד איום על ישראל. ולכן אני עומד על כך, שאחרי שנשיג את הניצחון המוחלט, אחרי שנחסל את החמאס, לא יהיה בעזה שום גורם שמממן טרור, מחנך לטרור או משלח טרור. עזה חייבת להיות מפורזת בשליטה ביטחונית מלאה של מדינת ישראל. אני לא אתפשר על שליטה ביטחונית ישראלית מלאה על כל השטח ממערב לירדן. כראש ממשלת ישראל, אני עמדתי בתוקף על העמדה הזאת, מול לחצים בינלאומיים ופנימיים כבירים. ההתעקשות שלי היא שמנעה במשך שנים הקמת מדינה פלסטינית שהייתה מהווה סכנה קיומית לישראל. וכל עוד אני ראש הממשלה, אמשיך לעמוד עליה בתקיפות. אם למישהו יש עמדה אחרת, שיגלה מנהיגות ויגיד את עמדתו ביושר לאזרחי ישראל.
So, the position of Israel, guys, is quite clear. And in my opinion, this is something that they are encouraging the people in the Arab world to say, see, we warned you. Israel never accepted the right of the Palestinians to have statehood. Therefore, you have to accept our way, which is we don't accept diplomacy, we don't accept negotiations, and we don't accept the legitimacy of Israel. Therefore, this type of rhetoric and this type of state policy by the Israelis will only encourage the state and non-state parties in the Arabic world to say that, okay, if that is the case, then we don't also recognize the right of the Israelis to exist as a state, right? So I think the approach that the Israeli side has taken, it's very, at least, not fruitful for themselves, because look, the time is not playing on the side of Israel. And I'm being very honest with you. I'm here to analyze. I'm not here to say my wishful thinking. Israel as a state has also its own presence in the region, but also it has also its duties, right? So the Americans, according to RFK himself, they see Israel as an aircraft carrier, as the eyes and the ears of the Americans in the region. So they see Israel not only as an ally, but also an entity that is preserving or serving the interests of the Americans in the region. And the Americans are the ones who send most of the weaponry to the Israelis. And every year, I think they sent like $2 billion worth of military aid, right? And beside that, in every way, intelligence support, economic support, media support, and everything to the Israelis. So put yourself in the position of an Israeli leader, and you are watching the changes in the international scene. And you can see clearly what's happening after the war on Syria and after the war in Ukraine, that the narrative, the balance of power is shifting. It's not like anti-Israeli powers are coming to power to dominate the international system, and namely China and Russia, but the power that you are dependent on in terms of protection, money, weaponry, etc., this country is its powers are diminishing. So I wouldn't really increase my radical rhetoric or spread this radical rhetoric if I was Benjamin Netanyahu and watching all these changes, because in my opinion, the time is not playing in the hands of the Israelis, and the United States is indeed becoming less hegemonic if you are an objective observer, an objective analyst, and you want to see how the United States is losing its leverage in different geographies and on different players in the Middle East itself, like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, to just give a little example, you will know that the Israelis are not in the best shape that they used to be in the past few decades. So this type of talk, we don't accept Palestinian state, this and that, I don't think it serves the Israelis. And I think the Saudis in this regard are going to overcome the Israelis in their approach. And I think after what is coming in the aftermath of the Gaza war, Netanyahu is not going to have its role. And likely there is going to be someone who says, I'm ready to deal with the Saudis this time. And by the way, while Benjamin Netanyahu, he posted this, and I just want to tell you, like, not everything like in Israel, the way they told you on TV, right? And for example, while he gave his speech, a committee for in Israel, there is this committee that they are negotiating about the whereabouts of the hostages in Gaza. The parents of the hostages, they stormed into the meeting and see the anger and see the intensity and how tense the situation is inside Israel, and how the people of Israel are angry at Benjamin Netanyahu and the government.
להמשיך ככה, תדעו לכם, זה לא יכול להמשיך ככה, אתם לא תשנו כאן ולנו מתים שם הילדים שלנו, כולכם אם אתם חושבים שמישהו יכול להמשיך ככה.
תנו להם להגיד מה שהם רוצים.
הילדים שלנו, תיכנסו כולם.
תעזוב אותו, תן לו להגיד מה שהוא רוצה.
אתם לא תשבו כאן והם ימותו שם.
תעזוב אותו, תעזוב אותו, תן לו להגיד מה שהוא רוצה. תעזוב אותה.
By the way, this video is today, and the families of the hostages stormed to the meeting of the committee. And I think they're right. I mean, Netanyahu was able to liberate and free all the hostages and the prisoners of war. And in exchange for a ceasefire, in exchange for freeing the Palestinian hostages and prisoners. But he doesn't want to do that. He set up the goal. The goal is complete annihilation of Hamas and Jihad. Can he do that? Maybe on the long run, I don't know. But what he can do is completely destroy Gaza. And this is what he's doing. And everybody is watching it. And everybody sees through the actions of the Israeli side. And that's why Israel is now accused of committing genocide in Gaza, right? That's why Israel had to go to the ICJ and defend itself. This is historic. History will write these things, and they will say Israel was accused of genocide. So imagine if the ICJ rules out in a year or 2 or 3 that Israel did violate the Genocide Convention. This will be written in history, and Israel will be considered a perpetrator of a genocide. So I think it's better for them to take the Saudi initiative. Guys, around 300 people is watching this live streaming. I would really appreciate if you hit the like button while you're watching. It attracts more people to join because the video will be recommended to more people to watch this live streaming. I would really appreciate that. So what are the Saudis are saying in this regard? The Saudis came recently. So Saudi Arabia, yes. Saudi Arabia says we want to normalize relations with Israel without path to Palestinian state. This is according to the foreign minister of the Saudi. Saudi Arabia's top diplomat has said the kingdom will not normalize relations with Israel or contribute to Gaza's reconstruction without a credible pathway to a Palestinian state, a non-starter for Israel's government. The dispute over Gaza's future as the war still rages with no end in sight pits the United States and its Arab allies against Israel and poses a major obstacle to any plans for post-war governance or reconstruction of the impoverished coastal enclave that is home to 2.3 million Palestinians. Before the October 7 Hamas attack on Israel that triggered the war, the US had been trying to broker a landmark agreement in which Saudi Arabia would normalize relations with Israel in exchange for US security guarantees, aid in establishing a civilian nuclear program in the kingdom, and progress toward resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Okay, there is some more. The Palestinians seek a state that would include Gaza, the Israeli-occupied West Bank, and annexed East Jerusalem, territories Israel captured in the 1967 Mid-East War. Israel views all of Jerusalem as its capital and the West Bank as the historical and biblical heartland of the Jewish people. It has built scores of settlements across both territories that are home to hundreds of thousands of Jewish settlers. The last of several rounds of peace talks broke down nearly 15 years ago. So since 15 years, there is no negotiations in this regard. By the way, I want to raise a conspiracy theory. So I'm telling you clearly this is a conspiracy theory, so don't take it like seriously. But conspiracies happen, right, in politics. And to think that there are no conspiracies, that would be very naive. I'm saying for an argument's sake, if the Netanyahu government and the security establishment in Israel knew about the attack on October 7, and they were watching and following that, detecting the movements, and they didn't act. So if you believe into the notion that Israel knew that there is going to be an attack by Hamas and they let it happen so that they can wage such a brutal war against Gaza, the reason for it could be because the Americans were telling the Israelis that let's normalize the relations with Saudi Arabia, between you and Saudi Arabia, but the Saudis are saying there need to be two-state solution. So if the Israelis were want to take hit two birds with one stone, which meaning that they would want to do normalization of relations with the Saudis, but at the same time kill the two-state solutions. If they were watching that there is a plan to attack and they let it happen, they would kill now the two-state solution by what we're seeing nowadays in the Gaza Strip, maiming the Palestinians, trying to ethnically cleanse them, completely destroying the Gaza Strip, and tell the international community, look what happened. They attacked us. We had to retaliate. This is what happened. And now let's go back to business as normal with the Saudis, and I want to normalize relations again. However, it seems that the Saudis are not buying into that, so they don't accept that. And in yesterday, and it was, I think, published today on CNN, Zakaria, he sat with the Saudi foreign minister, and they spoke about this. Let me just check if I can do this like this. No, actually not. Okay. Anyways, so he sat with the foreign minister Faisal bin Farhan, and he directly addressed these issues with him. Let's watch segment by segment and comment on it.
In the midst of the Gaza war these days, Saudi Arabia, the leading Arab state, finds itself in a quandary. On the one hand, it is, of course, naturally suspicious of its rival Iran. On the other hand, it supports the Palestinian cause, and it does not yet have relations with Israel. I spoke with Saudi Arabia's foreign minister, Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos. Foreign Minister, pleasure to have you on.
Good to be here.
Let me begin with the crisis at hand, which is these Houthi attacks on ships, the American retaliation. How worried are you that this could spiral out of control?
I mean, of course, we're very worried. I mean, we are in a very difficult and dangerous time in the region, and that's why we are calling for de-escalation. We of course believe very much in the freedom of navigation, and that's something that needs to be protected. But we also need to protect the security and stability of the region. So we are very focused on de-escalating the situation as much as possible.
So for the Saudis, guys, just for you to know, only a few years ago they were fighting against the Houthis with blood and iron, right? And it caused huge carnage in Yemen. So Saudis even changed their approach towards the Houthis nowadays, or Ansarullah, or the Yemenis, that even in an interview now with CNN, if you realize that he didn't attack the Yemenis and Ansarullah, he said that they are for the freedom of the passage of the trade, etc., etc. But we're focusing on the escalation. He's not going to deal and try to treat the escalatory situation in the region with more escalation. This is a good approach by the Saudis. This is a new approach in the past 2-3 years, but it's a good approach in my opinion.
And let me ask you about the other area where people are worried, Lebanon and Hezbollah. What are you seeing, and what would be the key to de-escalation there?
I mean, the key to de-escalation in general right now, I think, is ending the conflict in Gaza, because that's feeding all of this instability in the region. We were already a very unstable region, unfortunately, before, but this continuing conflict and the continuing carnage that we're seeing, we're now at 30,000 civilian dead in Gaza. We have to find a way to stop this crisis. We have to stop the killing in Gaza, and that will lay the ground, I believe, for stabilizing other situations in their neighborhood.
So this is also very important. We have to contextualize it. Guys, only 2-3 years ago, again, the Saudis were paying money to NGOs in Lebanon. They were giving money to political entities and parties in Lebanon to fight against Hezbollah, to cause all sorts of troubles for Hezbollah, political troubles, economic troubles, and even if that means military confrontation by some militias against the Hezbollah. ISIS was fighting against Hezbollah inside Lebanon only a few years ago. And we know that Bandar bin Sultan was behind it, the former chief of intelligence of the of Saudi Arabia. And now they have a different approach toward Hezbollah. They want to de-escalate in the region. And the reason for that is their economic vision, right? They have the Saudi Arabia 2030 economic vision. They want to become a prosperous economy in the region. They want to be a hub in the region for technologies, for industries, for different types of activities that related to industrialization of Saudi Arabia, also hosting the 2030 World Cup in Saudi Arabia. They are investing so much in football, as you can see, right? So it is in their interest nowadays to create a situation that can lead to sustainable peace in the region. You agree with that? You don't agree with that? That's something different. I'm just telling you what they see and how they think about it from the perspective of Saudi Arabia. And since they struck a deal with Iran, with the mediation of the Chinese, they de-escalated against each other directly and also through their allies. So the Secretary General of Hezbollah, he speaks, he gives a speech, he never attacks Saudi Arabia. He doesn't mention Saudi Arabia badly. In the past years, they were like exchanging fire statements against each other and also working against each other. Saudis are not escalating against Ansarullah in Yemen and against the Iranians in general in the region. So these de-escalatory steps, in my opinion, are welcomed in the region, and it serves the interests of the people in the region. So let's continue.
Now, there are people who think that the Saudi Arabian government has no love for Hamas. You have always regarded it as part of the Muslim
this is a tricky question.
Brotherhood kind of organization that is kind of an opponent of regimes like Saudi Arabia. So you're not too unhappy that the Israelis are crushing Hamas. You just wish they'd do it a little bit quicker and faster and not have so many collateral casualties.
Farid, unfortunately, what we're seeing is the Israelis are crushing Gaza. They are crushing the civilian population of Gaza. And this is completely unnecessary. It's completely unacceptable, and it has to stop. We have to find a way to stop the killing of civilians. We have to find a way to allow for humanitarian access.
Do you have
So you see that Farid Zakaria wanted for the Saudi foreign minister to say something about Hamas and say like, yeah, we don't like Hamas, or we don't accept Hamas, or we don't agree on the governance of Hamas or the legitimacy of Hamas. He didn't say that, right? However, what he said is that we have to focus on the humanitarian situation, and we have to say that we have to focus on the humanitarian situation, and we have to de-escalate in Gaza. And what these Israelis are doing there is unacceptable. Guys, I know some of you says the volume of the CNN is low. I cannot really help you with that because I cannot control the volume of the CNN here.
You have had indirect contacts with Israel over the years. I'm wondering, when you put this message out, which you have been putting out very consistently, are you getting any signs from the Israelis that things are going to change soon?
I mean, what we see, certainly in the media, what we see on the ground, unfortunately, is not indicative of a change. What's most disturbing is I don't see any real strategic direction, any real clear strategy. And this is very, very dangerous. And, the innocent civilians of Gaza are paying the price, but it's not just the civilians of Gaza. It is the stability of the region. We are seeing extraordinary levels of anger and upset because of the images of these civilians being killed in Gaza. So, we need to find a way to stop the fighting. We need to find a way to address these issues through dialogue, through a political process. That's the priority.
So you see that he's criticizing Israel, but he never criticized the even his competitors in the region, the regional competitors, whether they are Iran, whether they are Ansarullah, whether they are Hezbollah. He said the core of the issue, the core of the problems, why there is escalation in Lebanon, why Hezbollah is firing against Israel nowadays, it's because of the Gaza war. Why the Yemenis are blocking the cargo ships of the Israelis and now the Americans, because of the Gaza war. We have to focus on the root cause of the issue. And he says the Israeli side doesn't have a strategy. What is the end game of the Israelis in the Gaza Strip? Do they have a vision for the day after the Gaza war, right? They don't have that. So I think this is a very, very important interview. I think it puts things into proper context, and I think it shows what the Arabic countries, where the Arabic countries are standing.
What do you think is the most plausible next step? Would Saudi Arabia be willing to be part of an Arab force that goes in to replace the Israelis and stabilize Gaza?
Yeah. I think what we need to focus on is a solution for the Palestinian issue, not just for Gaza. I think all of the Arab states have indicated that they are willing to talk about a resolution or a solution that includes how we manage the situation in Gaza, as long as it's part of a bigger picture. And what we feel is necessary is some form of credible, irreversible path to a Palestinian state. That will give legitimacy to any Arab country, and us as a collective group addressing the issue holistically, including, of course, Gaza and the governance of Gaza.
So you're not ruling out the possibility of Saudi troops going
Saudi troops, I think that's something hypothetical. It's hard to address, and Arab troops even. I don't think what type of force on the ground is the issue. It's because if we offer real hope to the Palestinians, I think it will be very much within the capacity of the Palestinian people, the Palestinian Authority, to take that responsibility.
Same question with reconstruction. That is one of the areas people are hoping that Saudi Arabia will play a large role because your immense wealth. Is Saudi Arabia willing to finance the reconstruction of Gaza?
I mean, there's no point in talking about the reconstruction of Gaza if we're not going to talk about first ending the kill. Again, as long as we're able to find a pathway to a solution, a resolution, a pathway that means that we're not going to be here again in a year or two, then we can talk about anything. But if we are just resetting to the status quo before October 7th, in a way that sets us up for another round of this, as we have seen in the past, we're not interested in that conversation.
So Saudi Arabia is not interested in conversation with the Israeli side if this is going to be, if the status quo is going to be prior to the October 7th. They want a comprehensive solution. They want to give hope for the Palestinian people. They want statehood for the Palestinians. And only then the root cause of the problem, and that is occupation and the prevention of the Palestinians to have their own national state, only then the Saudis will agree to normalize relations with the Israelis. And I think now, as we say, the ball is on the side of the Israelis, and they have to play balls with the Israelis in this regard. And I don't think that the regional countries and the global countries are ready to sacrifice all their stakes and their interests in Saudi Arabia and with Saudi Arabia in order only to appease the Israelis. Saudi Arabia is a very important country in this regard, and I think that they would like to see a two-state solution, or they should seek for a two-state solution, or at least a Palestinian state, if they want for Saudis to normalize relations with the Israelis. Some of you say something about trolls posting something in the comments. Please let me know what's the name of the troll or something. If I have to block, I don't know, guys. I cannot really follow all the comments while I'm doing a live streaming. I would really appreciate it if you could help me in that. And if the person is not trolling and negotiate and just discussing and disagreeing with you, that's not trolling. But trolling is something different. So please let me know in the comments.
So let's talk about that political path. Is what you are saying that you would be willing to be part of the solution regarding the Palestinians, and I think you've said in the past publicly that you would be willing to continue to move toward discussions with Israel about normalization, if and only if there was, as you put it, a irreversible path to Palestinian statehood. In other words, not just conversations, talks, but a plan that to you seems irreversible.
Absolutely, and I think, Farid, that's the consensus of everybody in the international community. When I talk to the Europeans, even when I, what I hear from the Americans, everybody agrees that the only way to get out of this cycle of violence is to inevitably be on this path to a Palestinian state, and that's absolutely necessary, and that's what we're focused on.
So you've seen the news reports, I'm sure, that Prime Minister Netanyahu told his coalition that the reason he was going to be able to stay in power is it's something to the effect, I am the only person who will prevent the creation of a Palestinian state. how can that prime minister be your interlocutor if you're going to try and normalize relations with Israel?
I mean, it's up to the Israeli people to decide who the prime minister is. I'm not going to get into that discussion. I will just say that in order for the region to see true peace, to see not true stability, and to see real integration that delivers economic and social benefits for all of us, including Israel, is through peace, through a credible, irreversible process to a Palestinian state. We are fully ready, not just as Saudi Arabia, but as Arab countries, to engage in that conversation. I would hope that the Israelis would be as well, but it's up to them to make that decision.
But are you saying unequivocally that if there is not a credible and irreversible path to a Palestinian state, there will not be normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel?
And that's the only way we're going to get a benefit. So yes.
So the Saudis are saying that that's the only way we will benefit as Saudis, as Arabic countries, from the normalization of relations with Israel if there is a Palestinian state. I don't know. What do you think about this interview, guys? Please let me know your opinions in the comments below. I would really appreciate it. I try to analyze what he said in this regard. And the Saudis are not alone in this case calling for a Palestinian state. Nowadays, we have the Chinese. They say China's ambassador to the UN says it's high time to implement the two-state solution with concrete steps and calls for full membership for the Palestine in the UN. So the Saudis agree, the Chinese agree, the Russians agree, the Indians agree. Most of the international community agrees that the Palestinians must have their own state. I think I blocked the person who was, I don't know, you said trolling. I hope he was trolling because I don't like to block people, guys. And but I received several warnings and it was distracting me from continuing my live streaming, so I had to block that person because people were saying there is a troll here and doing some racist shit. I don't know. This is an article published by Owen Jones, which is, I summarized it just as we say, the butter of the issue in Arabic, because this is not about politics now, but also the credibility of the US and the Western governments. And he's rightly pointing out that the West's complete contempt for the lives of Palestinians will never be forgotten. And this article here, I just wanted to summarize it in this 2 paragraphs. He said, forget about any future Western claims about human rights and international law. Much of the world already regarded such self-righteousness with contempt as simply the latest ruse of to advance the strategic interests of countries that became rich at the expense of the rest of the globe. Centuries of often genocidal colonization bred lasting cynicism, as did more recent bloodbaths, such as the Iraq War, or active support for pliable tyrannies across multiple continents. After the West armed and backed Israel as it imposed mass deaths on Gaza through bombs, bullets, hunger, thirst, and the destruction of medical facilities, nobody other than the terminally gullible will listen to such claims ever again. But it's not just other countries that Western political and media elites should be panicking about. They face moral collapse at home too. Younger generations in countries such as the US and Britain have grown up taking racism far more seriously than those before them, and polling shows they are far more sympathetic to Palestinians than older citizens are. What do these young people then make of media coverage or the statements of politicians that doesn't seem to treat Palestinian life as having any worth of all? What conclusions are being drawn about the growing minority population of Western countries whose media and political elites are making so little effort to disguise their contempt for Palestinian life as it is extinguished on such a biblical scale? So yes, we have seen how the refusal to treat Palestinians as human beings made today's nightmare inevitable. We can see how the moral claims used to justify Western global dominance are permanently shredded, but little thought has been given to how political and media elites in Western nations have torched their moral authority, leaving it to fester alongside thousands of unidentified Palestinian corpses buried under the rubble. A turning point, to be sure, with consequences that will only be understood when it is much too late. Brilliantly said by O.S. Jones in this regard. I follow his YouTube channel as well. I hope one day I could be in touch with him, whether host him or he hosts me on his YouTube channel. Guys, I will promise you that I will tell you what's happening on the borders between Israel and Syria. And this is the article from Yedoot Ahronot. Let's translate it to English. As you may know, the Russian side aerospace is now conducting regular patrols near the borders of Syria with the occupied Golan Heights. And this, we didn't know what's the reason. And now this is coming from Yedoot Ahronot. They say the Kremlin is moving from threats to actions. The Russians are on the fence on the Syrian border. Last week, a Russian helicopter was spotted from our territory in the Golan Heights flying near the ceasefire line in Syrian territory. The Russian helicopter flew for long minutes along the line and then turned east back deep into Syria. The Air Force's air control followed the helicopter and gave a warning to our forces and the IDF's air defense batteries in the area. But since the helicopter didn't momentarily cross the ceasefire line in the Golan west into Israeli territory, there was no need to take any further action. A day after this event, which pressed without special public and media attention in Israel, the official Russian news agency TASS published a statement according to which aircraft of the Russian army began patrolling along the Bravo line of the ceasefire between Israel and Syria to monitor the situation. But Moscow's real goal is not to monitor. In fact, and against the background of the reports of increased Israeli operations in Syria, the Kremlin wants to hinder and deter Israel from attacking Iranian targets as well as Hezbollah targets and Palestinians operating in Syria in the service of Hezbollah, and also prevent arms transfers from Syria to Hezbollah, all under the guise of so-called Russian supervision of what is happening on the ceasefire line between Israel and Syria. It is quite clear that the presence of helicopters or the other Russian aircraft in the Golan Heights prevents Israel from operating in this airspace. According to foreign publications, a large part of the attacks attributed to Israel in Syria are carried out from within Israeli territory in the Golan Heights and northern Syria. So, according to Yedout Ahronot, guys, these patrols by the Russian side on the Bravo line between Syria and the Golan Heights aims at deterring and preventing further Israeli attacks from the direction of the Golan Heights. Because as I told you, most of the attacks from Israel on Syria, against Syria, happens either from the Golan Heights airspace, or from the regional waters in the Mediterranean, or from the airspace of Lebanon. They don't penetrate the airspace of Syria. So if the Russians, if this report is accurate and the Russians will prevent further attacks from the Israelis on Syria from the airspace of the Golan Heights, that means Israelis will be forced to wage these attacks from either from the regional waters in the Mediterranean or from the Lebanese airspace, or they have to go to Jordan and move to Al Tanaf border crossing where the American forces are located, and from there attack Syria. So we will see in the coming days, because Israel regularly attacks Syria, so we will monitor and follow what's happening, and I will also follow if they attack Syria, and I will report you back in this regard, guys. And we're again around 300 people watching this live streaming, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please hit the like button before you leave this video. It really gives me great help when you do that. YouTube is demonetizing every video that I speak about Israel, and they don't give me any revenues from it. And this is my, also, I'm presenting quality content, but it's not a hobby, it's a job. I put so much effort and investment to present this quality work to you guys. I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button, share this video with your friends. And if you can, only if you can, please become a patron to support me financially, since YouTube is cutting my revenues. You can see the link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you tomorrow, Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central European time again. And may peace be upon you all, wherever you're watching me, and see you tomorrow, guys.